Imagine, Saturday evening, 1975, a British living room. The whole family gathers in front of the television. Father in his armchair, mother on the sofa, children on the floor, on cushions, on the screen. Not Netflix, not 100 channels, not streaming video on demand. 3 channels. Only 3. BBC One, BBC Two, ITV. Want to watch something specific? Too bad. You watch what's being broadcast. When it's being broadcast. Missed it? No repeats until next year. Maybe. And at midnight, it all ends. The national anthem plays. The test card appears. A monotonous tone. The screen goes dark. Television closes down for the night. Until morning. Can't sleep? Want to watch something at 3 in the morning? Forget it. On the screen? Only snow. Sounds like a nightmare for a modern person, doesn't it? But for millions of British people in the 70s and 80s, this was normal life. Today, we're returning to an era when television was an event, when the whole country watched the same programs at the same time, when arguments about what to watch were settled by family vote or a fight over the remote. Welcome to the world of British television in the 70s and 80s. A world of 3 channels, TV licenses, test cards, and Saturday evenings in front of the generation game. Let's turn on the television. Just remember, it needs a few minutes to warm up.
Let's start with the basics. How many channels were there in Britain in the 70s? 3. BBC 1, the main channel of the British Broadcasting Corporation. News, drama, comedy, sport, everything for everyone. BBC 2, launched in 1964. More niche, documentaries, arts, educational programs, experimental content, and ITV, independent television. Commercial channel launched in 1955, BBC's first competitor, funded by advertising. That's all. Until 1982, when Channel 4 appeared. But we'll get to that. So if you turned on the television in 1975, you had 3 options. And if nothing appealed, read a book. But wait. Before you can even turn on the television, you need a license. A television license. TV license. This wasn't just a document, this was law. If you have a television at home capable of receiving broadcasts, you're obliged to buy a license. Every year. The money goes to fund the BBC. In 1971, a black and white license cost £7 a year. Color, £12, twice as expensive. By 1975, prices had risen. Black and white, £8. Color, £18. £18 doesn't seem much today. But in the 70s, it was significant. The average worker's weekly wage was about £40. So £18 was almost half a week's earnings.
And the government took license collection seriously. They had detector vans. Vans with equipment that supposedly could detect whether a television was operating in your home. Did they actually work? This was disputed. Many experts said the technology was questionable, but the threat was real. The BBC used fear. Advertising campaigns warned, "We can tell if you're watching TV without a license." Detector vans patrolled the streets. People were afraid. Caught without a license, a fine, a serious fine. In some cases, even prosecution. People actually went to court for non-payment of TV license.
And here's an interesting fact. Many people kept a black and white license but watched on a color TV, because a color license was twice as expensive. When an inspector came, they'd switch the TV to black and white mode or hide the color set. There was a whole color TV fraud industry in the 70s. TV rental companies knew about it. They had a scheme. Your black and white TV breaks down. They take it away for repair, but leave you with a color one, temporarily, free, and the repair somehow takes 3 to 4 weeks. During this time, the whole family gets used to color. The children see Thunderbirds in full glory. Mom sees Elsie Tanner's red hair in Coronation Street. Dad sees the difference between red and yellow balls in pot black. And when they call to say your black and white TV is fixed, well, what father can resist his wife and children's screams? You agree to take the color one. Pay more. Buy a color license. Brilliant marketing. And now imagine the strangest thing for a modern person. Television closed down at night, every night, around midnight, sometimes a bit later if showing a film. But usually, midnight. Until the early 70s, the government actually limited the number of hours channels could broadcast. The law said no more than a certain number of hours per year, about 3,300 hours. Why? Several reasons. Energy conservation, moral concerns, people should go to bed, not watch TV all night, and control over broadcasters. The government didn't want television to dominate people's lives. In 1972, these restrictions were lifted. But even after that, broadcasters didn't rush to operate around the clock. Why? Money. For the BBC, more broadcasting hours meant more production costs, salaries, technical maintenance, but income from the license fee didn't increase. For ITV, nighttime audiences were small, advertisers didn't want to pay for commercials no one would see, and the unions were against it. TV staff didn't want to work night shifts without significant pay increases. So television continued to close down. How did it happen? Let's look at a typical BBC One close down in 1976. 11:55 p.m., the last program ends. Maybe a film, maybe a drama. An announcer appears, a gentleman in a suit, or a lady in an elegant dress. They sit at a desk or stand before the camera. Good night. Tomorrow evening on BBC One, they describe next day's programs, list the main shows, times, then, and now let's look at tomorrow's weather. Weather forecast, quick, maps, sun and rain symbols, no computer graphics. Sometimes a news summary, brief, a few main headlines, and then the moment everyone knew. And that brings us to the end of today's programs. Good night, everyone. A clock appears. Simple graphics, hands showing midnight, and the music begins. The national anthem, God Save the Queen. In the early 70s on the BBC, this was the anthem overlaid on an image of a spinning globe, the BBC logo. On ITV, a portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. Sometimes footage of her inspecting troops. Everyone stood up, or were supposed to. By tradition, when the national anthem played, Britons stood, even at home, even in front of the television. Of course, by the 70s, many no longer did this. Young people thought it was ridiculous. But the older generation, they stood. By habit. By respect. The anthem ends. About 45 seconds. And then, the test card. The BBC showed test card F. Famous. A girl with a clown. Bright colors. Geometric patterns. This picture became an icon of British culture. Interesting fact. The girl in the picture was Carol Hersey, daughter of a BBC engineer. She was 8 when photographed in 1967. This photograph was broadcast millions of times until the early 90s. Along with the test card came a monotonous tone. 1 kilohertz. Loud, unpleasant beep. For technical purposes, engineers used it to adjust equipment. But for viewers, it was a signal. Go to bed. Television is over. Sometimes instead of the tone, calm music played. Classical. Light instrumental. BBC Two often did this. The test card could broadcast for hours until 6 a.m., when television resumed. On some channels, after the test card, the screen simply went dark. Black screen, static, snow, shh. And if you couldn't sleep at 3 in the morning, if you wanted to watch something, too bad. Turn on the radio or read a book. No television until morning. This was the reality of British television until the late 80s. Even when Channel 4 appeared in 1982, it also closed down at night. 24-hour broadcasting on the BBC. Only in 1997, when BBC One began broadcasting BBC News 24 at night. Now let's talk about color, or its absence. Color television came to Britain in 1967. BBC Two began color broadcasts on July 1st. BBC One and ITV followed on November 15th, 1969. But this doesn't mean everyone immediately started watching in color. Color TVs were expensive. Very expensive. In the early 70s, a new color TV could cost £300 to £400. That's more than an average worker earned in 2 months. So most people rented. Renting a color TV cost about 25 shillings a week, over £1. Black and white, half as much. Plus, you needed a color license. £10 in 1968, 12 in 1971, 18 in 1975. So in the early 70s, most British families still watched black and white television. In 1971, there were about 15 million black and white licenses. Color, only about 2 million. But change happened quickly. Color TVs became cheaper. People wanted color, especially for sport. Snooker, billiards with colored balls, became incredibly popular on color television. Pot Black on BBC Two, launched in 1969, became a hit. People bought color TVs specifically to watch snooker. Famous quote from commentator Ted Lowe: "Steve is going for the pink ball, and for those of you watching in black and white, the pink is next to the green." By 1976, color TVs had overtaken black and white. More than half of households had color. By 1980, the overwhelming majority. But amazingly, black and white licenses continued to exist, and exist to this day. In 2021, there were still 4,450 black and white licenses. Who buys a black and white license in 2021? Perhaps very elderly people with very old TVs, or nostalgic collectors, or people trying to save £49 versus £159 for color. But in the 70s, the transition to color was revolutionary. Suddenly, television became alive, vibrant, exciting. Children's programs exploded with color. Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet, The Clangers, all created with color in mind. Dramas became more cinematic. David Attenborough's nature documentaries, Life on Earth in 1979, were unthinkable without color. Even news changed. Color maps, color graphics, color clothing for presenters. Color made television more valuable, more important, central to family life. So what did the British watch in the 70s and 80s? Let's start with soap operas. Coronation Street. Launched in 1960, by the 70s it was a national institution. Working-class life in northern England. 2 to 3 episodes a week. Millions watched. EastEnders. Launched by the BBC in 1985 as a competitor to Coronation Street. Life in London's East End. Instant success. These shows stopped the nation. When Coronation Street or EastEnders was on, streets emptied, pubs emptied. Everyone was home in front of the television. Comedies, sitcoms, Fawlty Towers, John Cleese, 12 episodes from 1975 to 79. A sociopathic hotel manager. Genius. Only Fools and Horses. From 1981. Del Boy and Rodney, London Market Traders and Losers, became the most beloved sitcom in British history. Morecambe and Wise, comedy duo. Their Christmas specials attracted 28 million viewers, half of Britain's population. Drama and science fiction. Doctor Who continued from the 60s. In the 70s, Tom Baker, with his scarf, the Fourth Doctor. Iconic. Children hid behind sofas from the Daleks. Children's programs. Blue Peter. Launched in 1958. By the 70s, it was an institution. Crafts, adventures, charity appeals, famous dog shep. Grange Hill. School drama launched in 1978. Realistic, tough. Tackled subjects like drugs, racism, bullying, music shows. Top of the Pops. From 1964. Every Thursday evening. Week's top songs. Must watch for teenagers. Bands performed live or mimed. Sport. Match of the day. Football highlights. Every Saturday evening. Sacred ritual for millions of men. Important to understand. There was no choice then. If you wanted to watch Doctor Who, you watched Saturday evening at 6 o'clock. Missed it? Too bad. No repeats. No recording until late 70s when VCRs appeared. This created shared experience. Next day at work or school, everyone talked about the same thing. Did you see Doctor Who yesterday? Yes, that moment when the Dalek... The whole nation watched together, laughed together, discussed together, and families watched together. The TV was in the living room, one TV per household. The whole family gathered. No individual screens in bedrooms, no tablets, no phones. Arguments about what to watch were real. Dad wants football. Mom wants drama. Children want Doctor Who. Someone has to give in. Sometimes parents simply said, "We're watching this." End of discussion. Sometimes they voted. Sometimes children went to their rooms to sulk. But often, they found compromise. Watched what everyone liked, or alternated evenings. Television was a social activity, not isolation. But the 70s weren't all fun and games. There were crises. November 13th, 1970. A strike began. The color strike. Technicians at all ITV companies refused to work with color equipment. Why? Pay dispute. They wanted raises for working with new technology. The strike lasted almost 3 months, until February 8th, 1971. During this time, ITV broadcast only black and white programs, even those filmed in color. British people who'd just bought expensive color TVs were furious. They were paying for color licenses, but watching black and white. The workers won. They got a 45% pay rise, from £8,000 to $11,620. But this was only the beginning. 1973. Energy crisis. Oil embargo. Miners' strikes. The government introduces a 3-day working week to save electricity. Television must cut broadcasting. BBC and ITV agree to close down at 10:30 p.m. instead of midnight. Prime Minister Edward Heath addresses the nation on television. We must conserve energy. Everyone must do their part. People watched less television, lit candles, sat in darkness. The crisis ended after several months, but it showed how fragile broadcasting was. 1979, another strike, this time on BBC and ITV simultaneously, technicians demanding pay raises. The strike lasted 11 weeks, from August to October, summer of 1979. During this time, enormous numbers of programs were canceled, news cut short, live broadcasts canceled, repeats filled the airwaves. For many Britons, this was shocking. Television, such a reliable, constant thing, suddenly became unreliable. But from crisis came innovation. November 2nd, 1982, a new channel launched, Channel 4, the fourth channel. This was revolutionary. The first new terrestrial channel in 27 years. The first since 1955. But Channel 4 was different. It didn't produce its own programs. It commissioned them from independent companies. It gave a platform to voices that BBC and ITV ignored. Innovative, provocative, risky. First program on air, Countdown, word and number game. Starting at 2 p.m. November 2nd, 1982, still on air. Longest-running game show in television history. But Channel 4 also showed experimental films, alternative comedy, documentaries about minorities, things BBC and ITV wouldn't touch. The Tube, music show with live performances. Brookside, soap opera grittier than Coronation Street. Film on 4, avant-garde cinema. By the mid-80s, British television had expanded. 4 channels. More choice. More diversity. And then came new technology. Video recorders. In the late 70s, VCRs began appearing in British homes. VHS and Betamax fought for dominance. VHS won. By the mid-80s, many families had a VCR. Suddenly you could record programs. Watch them later. Skip commercials. This changed everything. No longer need to be home at exact times. Could record EastEnders and watch after dinner. Could record a film showing at midnight and watch on the weekend. Video rental shops opened on every street. People rented films, watched at home. No longer need to wait for a film to show on TV. BBC and ITV were nervous. They thought VCRs would kill live television. They were wrong. But it was the beginning of change. By the late 80s, the television landscape was changing. Satellite television appeared on the horizon. Sky TV prepared to launch. The era of 3 to 4 channels, fixed schedules, and the national anthem at midnight was coming to an end. From 3 channels to 300. From black and white to 8K. From fixed schedules to video on demand. From one family TV to a screen in every room and pocket. British television of the 70s and 80s seems like a world from another era. And it is. A world where the whole nation watched the same programs at the same time. Where television was an event, a ritual, a shared experience. Where children argued over the remote and parents decided what to watch. A world where television closed down at night playing the national anthem. Where the test card with the girl and clown was the last thing you saw before bed. Where the notion of watch anything anytime was science fiction. What did we lose? Community, a sense of national unity. Water cooler conversations the day after a big program. Simplicity. What did we gain? Choice, freedom, control, diversity, quality, access to world content. Was it better before? Depends who you ask. Older Britons are nostalgic for the 70s. Young people can't imagine life without Netflix. But one thing's certain. Television of the 70s and 80s shaped British culture, created shared memories, defined generations. Coronation Street, Doctor Who, Morecambe and Wise, the test card, the national anthem at midnight. It was an era, and it ended. Welcome to the future, where television never closes, where choice is infinite, where everyone watches something different. Is it better? Perhaps, but it's definitely less together. Thank you for watching. Or as a BBC announcer would have said in 1976. And that brings us to the end of today's programs. Good night, everyone.